now. Jill Kerttula is a current artist in residence at the McGuffey Art Center. She has been a printmaker, a painter, a graphic designer, art director, and educator. She has lived in Charlottesville, Virginia for the last 6 years, where she is a full-time fiber artist, and her prolific fiber pieces have been shown both nationally and internationally. And she is in the Smith Gallery with her work at the McGuffey Art Center right now. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Jill.
All right. Well, I do have a presentation, but first I just wanted to say thanks to Michael and to the behind the scenes person, Robin Harris, and to all the people at McGuffey that have made this possible. This is the first time McGuffey's tried to do anything like this. So we're hoping it goes smoothly, but if it doesn't, forgive us, okay? I think so, many of you are fairly familiar with the work that I do, but I'm going to host, you have disabled the participant screen sharing. I'm sorry, I can't share my screen. Okay, now I can, thank you. I'm going to do something a little different this time and not talk about, I give a lot of talks about specifically what kind of techniques that I use and so on and so forth. But this time I'm going to make it a little bit more general. And so, because there might be people on here that know nothing about stitching, I'm going to try and make this a combination of art and stitching. So with my art pieces, it takes 3 different things to make my art pieces. And I do my photography, and I do machine stitching, and I do hand stitching. And a lot of people say, why do I use photography as the basis of my work? Photography for me is the same thing as sketching or underpainting would be for other art forms. The photography really helps me decide on the colors, the composition, the size, in that I take photos almost every day of my life as I'm carrying around either my phone or my camera, and take the pictures. Very, very few of them end up getting made into artwork, fiber artwork for sure. But they also are a wonderful way, whether you're an artist or not an artist, to get your eye to really participate in life and to get your eye to start looking at what's around you and working on composition and all that sort of thing. So photography is just a real basis for that for me. The other thing that I like about photography is when you look at a piece, even a piece that's done from life or from plein air or portrait or something, it's totally a fabrication, and I mean that in a good way. It's come out of the artist's mind. I like somehow having this realism basis that when you look at my work, you know that exact thing actually existed in this world at one time. And those people really were doing that. And there's something about that I like very much. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then why do I add stitch to the photography? Why not just leave it at the photography? Well, stitches act like my brush strokes, and they will add or modify colors. They add texture. And I really like to use stitch a lot to really make it look what I saw. What I say is my photography is what I saw, but once I add the stitches, it's how I saw it. And so I can make a better emphasis, I can add other things to it and so on and so forth with my stitching. So this piece that you're looking at here is an example of the difference that happens between the original photography and the final piece. This piece was in Quilt National, for those of you who are aware of that show, the last 2 years. And the photo on the left is the exact photo that I took. And you can see it's a nice photo, but there's missing color, it's missing a lot, but I really like the composition and I really love the jump off spot of it. So on the right, you can see what I've done with it, how I've enhanced the colors, not really changed them a lot, but enhanced them. I enhanced the blur of the woman walking and enhanced the sidewalk a lot. Also in the brickwork in the back of the building, there's a lot of both hand and machine stitching back there to give it additional textures. Here's more of a close-up of how you can see that I transformed the brickwork into really fiber artwork. And in the back, you can also see where some of the bricks were actually made from additional pieces of fabric. Here's another one. This is actually a detail of a piece of the left-hand side being a photograph taken of this guy, obviously with his cell phone. But I really wanted to make the cell phone much more a part of this and have it be about the cell phone. And so you can see on the right-hand side, all the hand stitching and the changes of textures that have gone into the piece, both in the sidewalk around him, the brickwork, and most importantly, the cell phone itself. Here's another one where you can see the photo on the left, the actual photo, and on the right, the finished piece. And again, I wanted to get rid of the Urban Outfitter sign on the upper under the lights. You can see I've gotten rid of that. And I don't do anything of that with Photoshop. It's all done with the fabric. So you can see the texture added to the interior window, how I've modified the doorway going in and made all those other modifications. In my title, I see, oops, let me go back. So here's a close-up of some of the techniques in there. On the left-hand side, those brickworks are, each brick is a separate little piece of fabric that's been stitched in place. The center is mostly machine stitching, where you can see the work with the machine, and there's also layers of organza or tulle or other things that are covering the original photo. And then on the right, you can see the close-up of the woman and how much hand stitching has been done to her to bring out the stitching. A lot of the stitching is covering the photo, and I think you can see on this how very little of the actual photo ended up being available in the final piece. It's mostly, much of it is overprinted. Another thing that I want to see if I can, whoops. Okay, well, I'll just, let me go back a minute. I want to go back to this one just a minute again to also talk about brush strokes and how if you look in Marla, I know you're listening, and there's a few other painters that I know that are listening. When I go back through with hand stitching, a lot of times this hand stitching, like on her shoulders or in her hair, are really like those final dots of brush of highlights that a painter puts in with their brush. And I view my hand stitching very much the same way as that. The next thing, why did I do the subject that I did for this particular show? We moved from Wisconsin to Charlottesville about 6 years ago. And in Wisconsin, I lived in a rural area. It was absolutely beautiful, even with the snow, but a lot of horses, a lot of cows. We lived in a log home. And so my whole life was very centered on the nature and being out a lot in nature. This path that you see on the left there is a 20-mile bike trail that ran literally across the street from us. So I could walk for 20 miles in either direction, because it actually was 20 miles in both directions, and be in nature all day. So when we decided to move to Charlottesville, we decided to try urban life. And I live in the building in the upper right there. And it's within a block from downtown Charlottesville. So my walking path now is down the streets of the city. Up until the pandemic, there was also a large concert area a block away from our house, and they would have free concerts every Friday night. So with people all the time. And it's a whole different thing. And what I started to realize was that in the city, there's as much beauty as there was in the country. It's just a different form of beauty. It comes in people and in man-made objects, and truly some nature as well, obviously. So my show that's here at McGuffey is mostly of people, and a lot of the pictures include people. Excuse me just a minute. A couple of weeks ago, I got one of the best compliments I've ever gotten from somebody. They said, you know, your work is a lot like Hopper's. And I went, whoa, I can deal with that. And I think what they were referring to was these people. And I went on, did a little research on Hopper's artwork, and there was a quote that he had, which I won't be able to quote right now, but it was basically, a critic said to him, are all your pictures about loneliness? And he said, no, that's what a critic wants to say. He said, my pictures are what the viewer makes of them. And that really hit home with me, because my people in my pictures they're not portraits, they're not specific people, they're not of a specific event. They're supposed to just be a person who you as the viewer can look at and come up with your own story about. There are people very often in the middle of something. They aren't where they're going, or they're on their way somewhere, or they're waiting for something to happen. And I like that part of life where you have no idea if they're going to a good thing or a tragic thing. You have no idea what's going on with their life. And so it's really a reflection of you as a viewer that you can bring to my work, because I'm not trying to tell you it's happening. So here's one of my quilts in the show is just sort of a sampler of the people, and some of these people you'll see in other quilts. But like I say, these aren't portraits, they're common experiences. You know, who isn't walking their dog? Who isn't waiting on their cell phone? Who isn't waiting for an elevator? We've all had these experiences, and we've had them at moments in time that were actually probably more meaningful than we realized they were at the time. So this is one of my favorites that is in the show. It's the hug. And I think we all needed this right now. This is a vendor who's always on the Seaville Mall selling wares. And one day as I was walking by him, one of his customers was just giving him a hug. And I think in this time right now, we all need a hug. And so that's another one that's in here. What I would say also about the show, there are two things. One, if you haven't gone on the McGuffey website or on my website, jillkerttula.com, the entire show, including details of each piece, are on my website. So you can go there and really look at each one. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time going through each one on site here. And so please do go there and look at more. But at this point, I would like to take questions from people if you have any. Or Michael, have you received any questions?
Haven't received any questions yet. I have a few of my own, though, to get it started. I liked what you had to say about the photographs you take being of common experiences. So do you not ever stage photos that you take?
No, I've never staged photos. In fact, on the way here today, I probably took 5, 6 photos of different things on the way here. But I spent a great deal of my life as a photo director, where I went in with many wonderful professional photographers and did a lot of staging of photography. And now I just love being behind the scenes and just seeing life happening and catching those little moments of life happening, either with sketching or with photography. And It's gotten pretty easy because people are so busy looking at their phones. They usually don't care who else is looking at them while they're looking at their phones.
We do have a couple of questions now. Margaret McGrath, how large do you like to work?
That's a really good question because what I'm finding is almost all artists has a size that they like to work to. And I do, looking back at most of my work, I would say I like accessible size. And by that, what I mean is a size people can feel comfortable looking at or even putting in their home. So probably the biggest one that I've done has been maybe 4 foot by 6 foot. But most of them run about 2 foot by 3 foot, 3 foot by 4 foot, somewhere in that area. However, I was just doing some research and thinking about, I'm taking 6 months off right now out of my studio and just kind of rethinking what I'm doing and what I want to do in the future. And one of the things I'm thinking about doing is trying to do a year-long project, which would be one piece, just work on it for a whole year, really large. So I don't know what it's going to be or whether it will be, but that's what I'm thinking. But for now, what you see in the show is pretty normal.
Okay. Process, do you print the photo on fabric and then work from there?
Yes and no. I have the photo printed. I do not do that. I don't like technology as far as having to deal with machinery and deal with things. So I send out my photos to be printed on fabric. And people always ask me, like, where do you do it? And do they do the blacks dark enough? And do they do this and they do that? I don't care, because when I get it back, if I don't like one area, it gets covered up with fabric and stitch. So it's okay, however it comes out is fine with me. Because like I say, it's just my underlying sketch. I don't want a photograph that's been stitched. I want fiber art. And so that makes a difference. The thing about technology too is I spent a long time as a graphic designer. And at the beginning, I'm so old that graphic design was literally cut and paste. I mean, you literally cut things and you literally pasted things, and you would make mock-ups and you'd work with your hands. And it was just wonderful. And then the computers came along and you no longer touched anything except a keyboard. So when I quit doing that and started doing my artwork, I thought the artwork that I do, I want it to be tactile. And that's one thing that's very important with me with my art, is I literally am holding it, putting it through the machine. I'm literally holding it, stitching it, and that whole tactileness of it is exceedingly important to me. So I don't want to load fabric into a printer. I'll let somebody else do that.
All right, let's get to, have you found it difficult getting into shows with figurative work? A question from Holly Cole.
That's a good question. I don't know, because I don't know why I don't get in some, and I don't know why I did get in others. You know, you don't know. I know, and Holly, I know where you're coming from in the art quilting world. There's trends of different things, and abstracts and geometrics are a big part of the art world. I just make my stuff, and if it gets in, it gets in. But I will say, like in Quilt National, that piece I had in, I think there were maybe 5 figurative pieces in the whole thing. So yeah, it depends on the jurors.
Do you have ideas or plans for new series that you can share with us?
No, because I am a blank slate right now. That is why I'm so happy to have this show. It was, by the time I get everything done with this show, I kind of felt like I was in perpetual motion with, and just sort of cranking out another one of this sort of thing, which that sounds crass, but I cared about what they were, but nonetheless, it was yet another one. And so I just wanted to take a step back and see, I'm doing a lot of reading, I'm doing some writing, I'm taking a photography class, I'm doing a lot of things I want to try some paper mache, I want to try some different things and just see where it goes. So I don't know, I have no clue, but if you figure it out, let me know.
I have a question too, about, because the show has sketches, includes
Oh,
sketches.
yeah.
So did you want to talk about?
Sure, yeah, I have a couple of them right here. I didn't, this is one sketch I think you can see of somebody at a coffee shop. And then here's a young woman that was drinking her Chick-fil-A coffee. I have, and again, they're all on my website, so you can go see them all on there. I won't take you through them here. But sometimes when I don't have my camera with, or when I just want to try something different, I do these sketches, and they're always on site of people just sitting around. There's 2 or 3 coffee shops, lucky to be on the mall. There's coffee shops, there's outdoor dining. There's all kinds of people who have no clue what that weirdo over in the corner is doing. So I can almost sketch away. And like I say, either they're busy talking to each other or their heads buried in their phone or their computer, and it works well. And along with that, I've started taking life drawing sessions here at McGuffey also. So drawing is another thing that I'm trying to get back into, and seeing, you know, maybe the drawing will work its way into fiber art. I don't know.
Has the move to the city changed your work, especially now with COVID restrictions?
Yeah, it's a lot harder to take pictures of people when there's no people around, or when they all have masks on. So I've taken a lot more pictures of buildings and things like that. But other than the subject matter, I can't say it's interesting, because when I first started doing some of these figurative pieces, my son was visiting and he looked at me and says, "Mom, you know, those look a lot like your paintings you were doing 20 years ago." And I laughed because I looked at them, and when I really thought about it, yeah, the colorways were very much the same. They were very textural paintings. They were a lot the same vantage point. And so, you know, we don't know. We're hardwired, we artists, in some ways.
And Diana Bennett wants to know if you teach online.
No, I don't. I am asked to do that a lot, both in person and online. And when I started doing this, like I said before, I spent 40 years fulfilling other people's wishes as a graphic designer and as a creative director. And then I spent 7 years making clothing out of recycled clothes for people. And when I started doing this, I thought, I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. I don't care if a gallery wants them. I don't want to do commissions. I'm going to make my stuff. If people like them, they can buy them. But I don't, no. I don't. I tried to do a couple of sessions that were coordinated with shows, and even like this one, you know, so I spent several days then trying to make the presentation and think what I'm going to do, and it gets me all discombobulated. So no, sorry.
I have a question from Cynthia Quinn. I love the quilt of 3 women standing by water. If you know which one I'm referring to, what is the story about building that one?
Yeah, that one, for the rest of you, it's on my website. And if you go under the menu under demonstration, it's in there, and it shows a step-by-step demonstration of how the whole thing was done. It's from a photograph. My husband and I have, up until this year, gone to Virginia Beach every fall. And it started because I was doing some art shows there, and it has continued just because it's a great time to go. There's no one around. But I get up very early to take photos of the sunrise and such. And those 3 women were 3, I think they're Mennonite women. I'm not sure what their religious affiliation is, but you can tell by their clothing that they are with one of the simple religions. And these girls were just so sweet. They were just walking down the beach at a time when I think they were hoping no one else would be on the beach. So I respectfully stayed away from them. And they were doing what we all do on the beach, picking up shells and looking at them. And yeah, it's a nice piece. I like that piece a lot.
Do you use a domestic machine or a long arm?
Again, back to technology. A domestic machine is almost more than I want to deal with. There's no way I'm dealing with a long arm. And part of that is, again, I want to hold my fabric as it's being stitched. I don't want it on a big roller. And I use so many different kinds of, I probably in a given 8-hour spiel of working on a piece will rethread my machine minimum once an hour and often more than that. So, to try and deal with that on a long arm, I don't want to deal with that. And I also use zigzags. I use a lot of different stitches. So, that gives me shivers.
Do you ever do functional pieces?
I do. Yeah, I've made several bed quilts. I have a bed quilt on my bed at home and 2 that we use watching TV in the evening. And I do make functional quilts. They aren't pretty. I would never enter them in anything because I cannot make a corner square. I cannot square a quilt. I cannot make my pieces all end. I mean, I look at like Mariner's Star quilts or some of these Mariner's Compass quilts or some of these and go, that's a head I don't have. So, yes, Judith, I see. No, so I make functional quilts, but they're very simple, usually scrappy quilts.
Okay. I have a question from Margaret Blank. Do you use any type of fabric or do you have favorites?
Okay. Well, let's start with the bottom layer with the photograph. I do ask for, there's about 3 or 4 different fabrics that I use getting the photo printed on, depending on how white I want the piece, because polyester fabric, for instance, is much, much brighter white and will hold ink much better than cotton. And the cotton will absorb the ink a little bit more and it's a little softer. So depending on what I'm looking for, or even though the photograph doesn't necessarily show a lot, I want to be able to have that influence. So choosing those, I will choose a different fabric. I used like a canvas linen, I've used a silky fail, I've used a chiffon, and I've used a cotton and a sateen, so several different types. But then for the other, I will use anything and everything. I have used Halloween fabrics, I've used organza, I use lace, I use tools, I use every kind of cotton you can imagine. I've used velvet, I use whatever. So and the same thing for thread. I choose my thread by color. So I can't even tell you what brand I'm using. I just use whatever color I need. And it's very hard to find some colors, so.
Do you stitch first and
then quilt?
And then quilt?
No, I actually well, let's see. The quilt starts as a sandwich of the backing and then usually I use like a very thin cotton batting in between, and then the photograph. Now, very often I will put other fabrics between the photograph and the batting. And that is because sometimes I'll cut through the photographs and let those colors come through. And that you can see some examples of that on my website too. So anyway, I've got that sandwich. And then usually I will do the majority of machine stitching first. Then I will go in and do hand stitching. And then if I see I need to go back and do any more machine stitching, I'll do that. But like I said before, the final stitches are always hand stitched little highlights or so on. So it's kind of goes back and forth.
And do you ever think about breaking out more explicitly into the 3rd dimension?
Probably not. Number one, because again, technical aspects of, structure and, all of that is, I'm not into engineering, or math. So, and both of those are required a lot in 3D. Plus, one thing I have found out as an art student and as an artist, the few sculptures that I've made have been, here's the front, here's the back, here's the side. I don't do 3D well. They end up being 2D pieces. So probably not. It's just not something that I look forward to.
Do you get more than one version of a photo printed?
No, I usually just get one.
Okay.
Let me see, she had another part of that. Sometimes it looks like
Sometimes it
you
looks
have
like
work
you
on a
add-
background and then put the figure on top of it. Now, usually that's the background has been put on top of the photo and just the figure showing through. Yeah.
And let's see, how do you feel fiber arts fits into the art world in general?
Oh, I want to know which Lori this is from. Um, I don't know. It's an ongoing problem. Part of the problem, and what I mean by that, it's the art world has been slow to accept fiber art as an art form unless it's being done by a person who's already been established in the art world, or it's by somebody's sudden encounter with historic something or others. So it's been hard to break into that part of it. And I also think that sometimes we fiber artists don't mind being in a world of our own, so how do I feel it fits in? I feel it could fit in. For me, it's one and the same because I approach my fiber art exactly as I would approach a painting. For others, they approach it as a craft. So much like watercolor or oil painters have the Sunday painters and the gallery painters, fiber art has both of those as well.
Which artists have influenced you, and are you more inspired by other photographers, fiber artists, and are you more interested in people?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm highly interested and influenced by painters. And like I said before, a lot of my I really view my stitching as brush strokes, and I apply them much the way, and even the fabrics, I apply them as glazing or as textures or stuff, very much the same way as a painter would apply their work. As far as specific painters, there's a lot of them I like for different reasons. Like there's, if I look at a Degas or any one of that ilk, the composition is what just blows me away. Not so much the color. I could care about his ballerinas. I could care about his color, pretty color, but the compositions are just amazing. And so that has influenced me. Like I said before, Hopper, I like what he does there. I like Wayne Thiebaud, the way he uses color. I like a lot of my fellow artists whose names you wouldn't recognize, some who are watching right now, but there's easily influenced by a lot of stuff like that. And I'm not influenced by photographers so much because I don't understand the technical aspects of photographs. So I can look at a photograph and I really can enjoy the subject or enjoy the composition or enjoy the color, but I don't know how it was obtained, which I think that's why I like looking at paintings. I understand the process of painting, so I can be influenced by it a little bit better.
Does your hand stitch go through the back layer?
Yes, the back of my pieces are horrendous and messy and terrible and have little pieces sticking out, and I don't care. Because yes, I go through all the way through. Now, there are exceptions. If I'm doing some running stitches, sometimes I can just go through the top, but the texture of just running through the top layer and the texture of running back and under all layers is going to be completely different. So my answer to that would be, what do I want the effect to be? And that will determine how deep I go.
Let's see. I was interested in that comment you had during your talk when you said what the quilt represents is how you see things, not what you see.
Right.
Are you able, and then you mentioned that your paintings and your fiber work are similar. So do you have a sense of, can you articulate how you kind of see things, how you transform the images? Is there a pattern to that?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And one of the things that I'm learning about myself through photography, because if I look at the literally thousands of photos I take in a year, And all of a sudden they'll see these similarities. And I think I'm not a cerebral artist. I don't think ahead of time a lot about what I'm going to do. I don't angst about what am I trying to say. I'm a maker. I just make stuff. And so a lot of what I learn about my artwork is in retrospect. When I go back and look over what have I done. And doing that, what I have found, like it was a real aha moment when someone was asking me about the people in Hopper and I realized now my people are not portraits, they're just people. And the same thing, I'm incredibly obsessed in photography with details. Like the other morning there was frost and oh my God, just the frost on the edge of a leaf or any of those kind of things. So just those details are just amazing. So I think if I had to sum it up in one word, what really excites me about life, it would be the mundane. Whatever is normal, whatever is mundane. If we all learn to look at what's mundane, the world would be much better and much prettier to us all.
I should have asked this question right after the one about the hand stitching and the back layer, but it says, do your hand stitches go through all of the layers?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about before. Only if I want that real heavy stitch, they'll go through all the layers and sometimes just through one or two of the layers.
All right. And do you, what about your photography? Do you ever show your photography just as photography?
No, I don't. In fact, I've never even printed out any of my photography on anything except fabric. I don't have any framed. I don't have any, they're not in the show. It's my sketchbook and it's not, now that could change because this photography class I'm taking with, and I have to say kudos to Ricky Timms. This is just the most incredible class I've ever taken. That I might get to a level where I actually would print out a few of them, I guess, but that's not, no interest in being, I think when I look at photography, and there's some photographers here at McGuffey that just blow my socks off. And I realized I'm here, they're there. There's such a jump that I'd have to make in equipment and knowledge that it's not worth it.
And a comment from Lee, at the risk of trying to define what you do, your pieces do seem to often invoke a mood.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad you found a mood in them, and I hope it's a mood that means something to you, because I think I find it very hard, and I think it's incredible if an artist can pull some specificity out of their viewer. But my life and each one of your lives has brought us to this point in such completely different ways that I can't even guess that an icon of mine would get the same response from an iconography you look at. So from that standpoint, for me, the mood is, again, the mundane. It's very neutral, a lot of them. But if you get a different mood out of them, go for it, grab it, enjoy it.
Do you ever stretch your pieces on frames?
Yeah, I have, because I'm here at the art gallery, and everything in my studio or in this show are hanging free, they're not stretched. But there have been shows here when it's a group show and there's everybody else's painters or something like that, that I will put mine on stretcher bars just for the continuity's sake of a show.
Okay.
But all the painters here are very jealous of me when I have to ship my artwork and I can just roll it all up and stick it and not have to package it like they have to do their paintings and frames and so on.
And a question from Cherie, what kind of camera do you use, and do you also use your phone to take pictures?
Yes. And I love this quote. It's not my quote. Somebody once said, the best camera to use is whatever camera you have with you. And so I use my phone a lot if I don't have my other camera with me. I have a Olympus mirrorless camera. I used to have a Sony mirrorless, and the only difference between a big DSL and a mirrorless is 5 pounds. they're just much lighter and easier to carry and easier to use. So that's what I have. And I also have, my Olympus has a lens that can go from, and I should know the technical numbers, but I don't, really close to really far. And it's very adaptable because it's just, again, it's my sketchbook. So I just want one that's as easy to use as can carry with me and so on and so forth. So whatever. But yeah, I use my phone a lot and I do not have an Apple. I have an Android.
And my last question is, does your work ever take a form other than an art quilt?
I did a collaboration show about 2 years ago with 2 other artists here at McGuffey. One who was a woodworker and one is a clay person. And for that, I did do some 3-dimensional things where the person made some clay pedestals and I made fiber bowls on top. I made one huge piece that was 3-dimensional fiber, and then the woodworker had wood coming through it and that sort of thing. And that's where I learned that I am not an engineer and am not interested in doing that much more. So I'll stick to flat stuff.
All right, well, I'm not seeing any more questions here. I've pretty much exhausted mine. If you have any more questions, feel free to add them. Otherwise, we could probably finish this.
I just want to say again, thank you all for joining us. This was really fun, and I hope it was fun for you too. And again, if you came in late and you don't live in Virginia, in the chat, would you just put where you're from? Because we want to know how far flung people came for this. So that would be interesting to see. But really appreciate all you being here. Thank you.
And also, if anyone's interested, there are 2 art talks coming up at the end of the month. One is for new members on the 24th, and the other one is a talk with Misha Goldberg, who just completed a really fascinating mural at the McGuffey Art Center. So registration is open for those. So if you're interested, you can go and register on the web on McGuffey at McGuffeyArtCenter.com. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.